Today's video is brought to you by creativesdothis.com. The old Pontiac sat forgotten in the corner of a dusty Pueblo scrapyard. It had been there for years, sun-bleached, rusting, and silent. But in February of 2024, police officers arrived with a warrant, and they carefully opened the trunk. Inside, they found a suitcase. Inside that suitcase, something wrapped, small and heartbreakingly fragile. It was a discovery that would reopen a case that nobody even knew existed, because that discovery belonged to Jesus Jr, who, along with his sister Yesenia, had vanished 6 years earlier, and in all that time, nobody had ever officially reported them missing. How could 2 children just disappear and nobody noticed for 6 whole years? To understand that question, we have to start somewhere else entirely. A storage unit on West 6th Street back in January. And I'll give you one final warning. This one is truly heartbreaking and horrifying. By the way, this is Dark Case, and you can call me Jack. I bring you rare and unseen true crime cases, as well as other things that you may later regret knowing, with multiple uploads every single week. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, then join the Dark Case family now by hitting subscribe and turning all notifications on. And now for today's silly little question. Would you donate a kidney to the person that you hate the most in the entire world, if you were the only match for them alive on the planet? Let me know down in the comments, and based on your reply, I may judge you, maybe not. All of your support over on Patreon, as well as right here via channel memberships on YouTube, are so appreciated, and I really can't thank you all enough. However, thank you. And now, on with the video. It started with a smell and a mother's instinct that something wasn't right. On the morning of January the 20th, 2024, Corena Minjarez's mother was helping her daughter to clear out a storage unit at King's Storage on West 6th Street, based in Pueblo, Colorado. Corena and her boyfriend, Jesus Dominguez Jr, had been living out of that unit, but they were now being evicted for non-payment. So Corena's mother came to help, but she quickly became concerned about a large metal container pushed up against the wall. It was sealed shut, it was heavy, and something about it just felt off. She opened it, and inside was a trash can, and inside that trash can, encased in hardened concrete, were what appeared to be human remains. Obviously horrified, she contacted the police. Authorities responded just after 8:30 AM, and the scene was quickly locked down. The Special Victims Unit and the crime scene team were called in, and within 2 days, authorities confirmed what the mother had feared. Inside that trash can, inside the concrete, was the body of a girl. This video is sponsored by Creatives Do This, a platform that I've helped to launch that features real interviews with real artists, candle makers, musicians, and creatives of all kinds who are making it work. Right now, we're looking for creatives to feature. So if you've made money from your creativity, whether it's a full-time career or a new side hustle, and you want to share how you did it, we'd love to hear your story. It's just a short text-based interview, and it takes around 10 minutes. And in return, you get free lifetime access to everything that the platform becomes. Plus, your work will get featured to inspire others and to build your brand. Hit the link in the description or the pinned comment to take the quick interview and to become one of the 100 founding members. There's now less than 50 spaces left. www.creativesdothis.com. Police began trying to identify the remains and the people who had been renting out the unit, and that search obviously led them to Corena Minjarez and Jesus Dominguez Sr, both aged 37. Just to clarify here, Jesus Sr. was the two children's father, and Corena was the children's stepmother. The children's biological mother was a woman named Alberta. And actually, quite interestingly, Jesus Sr. and Corena originally met as pen pals, whilst Jesus was in prison. I hope that all makes sense, I just wanted to help set the scene. At the time, neither of them seemed particularly alarmed. They sat for interviews with detectives. They offered vague timelines, and even floated the idea that the two children, 3-year-old Yesenia and 5-year-old Jesus Jr., were still alive and possibly living with relatives in Arizona. But when detectives followed up on that lead, it went nowhere. Nobody in Arizona had seen either of the children, and come to think of it, no one in Colorado had either. In fact, as Pueblo police soon discovered, nobody anywhere had seen either child since the summer of 2018, 6 years earlier. That was when everything changed. A DNA match confirmed that the remains in the concrete did indeed belong to Yesenia Dominguez. Her brother, though, was still missing, and police now had very good reason to believe that he too may not be alive. Investigators started asking the couple about cars, and this is because one family member remembered something strange about Corena's old Pontiac Grand Am. A foul smell, to be specific. A smell that never quite went away. When Yesenia's remains were identified in January of 2024, one question rang louder than the rest. How did nobody notice these children were missing? Between 2018 and 2024, there was no missing persons report filed for either child, no school alerts, no medical checkups missed, no welfare checks requested. Instead, friends and extended family were told a simple rehearsed lie, that Jesus Jr. and Yesenia had gone to live with relatives in Arizona. And since Jesus Dominguez Sr. was the children's biological father, and Corena Minjarez was their legal guardian during this time, there was no immediate reason to question it. The couple even continued collecting government benefits for the children, long after the time that the kids could be accounted for. Behind closed doors, though, within the family, there were concerns. Barbara Sanchez says that her relationship with the two children is like a second grandmother to them, and a second mother to their biological mother, Alberta. Barbara and Alberta were tied together in a kind of web made up from Jesus Sr.'s previous relationships. So Barbara Sanchez, this second grandmother, noticed that she wasn't seeing the kids anymore. She also remembered Corena snapping at her, saying, "Why do you care? You're not their grandmother." Whenever Barbara or the children's mother Alberta tried to visit, they were blocked from doing so. At one point, the group even drove to Corena's apartment in order to ask where the kids actually were. However, Corena called the police on them, and then claimed once again that the children had simply moved out of state. And after that, they stopped asking. And for 6 long years, that story held out. Corena and Jesus Sr. then drifted in and out of housing, sometimes in motels, sometimes living in their car. They used Brown and Crystal regularly. They pawned their possessions and they moved on frequently. By the end of this period of time, they were living in a storage unit, one that was filled with junk, and a metal bin full of concrete. According to police, they never told anyone that the children were missing, and the only reason that investigators even began looking for them was because Yesenia was accidentally found, and now the fact that there was no sign of her brother was extremely concerning. And sadly, this concern would manifest into a dark reality very soon, because when detectives asked the couple about vehicles, a scrapyard on the outskirts of Pueblo had something that belonged to Corena, her old Pontiac Grand Am, the one she used to live in. And in the trunk of that car, under layers of cat litter, baby powder, and a comforter, lay a suitcase. And inside that suitcase was Jesus Jr. It happened on March the 14th, 2018. Dominguez Sr. later testified that he and Corena were driving her 2004 Pontiac Grand Am to pick up the kids and a nephew from school. He said it was an ordinary day, until that is, 3-year-old Yesenia had an accident in the back seat. She simply wet herself. But for Corena, this run-of-the-mill issue one that is so easy to fix and then to comfort the child, was instead apparently unforgivable. Rather than clean Yesenia up and change her clothes, Corena instead pulled the car over and made her stepdaughter sit on the floor of the vehicle on top of a plastic bag. This was in order to keep the seats clean. Dominguez Sr. said she stayed there for the rest of the ride. By the time they arrived home, Corena claimed that Yesenia had stopped breathing. Neither adult called 911. Neither of them took her to the hospital or did anything to help. Dominguez Sr. later told the court that Corena panicked, and that is because Yesenia was already showing visible signs of maltreatment, including a bite mark on her hand. So, rather than getting help for Yesenia, they did the unthinkable. Corena told him the girl wasn't responding, so instead of getting help, they carried their daughter inside and placed her in a suitcase. At this time, they were living in a rental home, but eviction was looming. So when the sheriff came knocking a few days later to kick them out, they grabbed what they could and moved into the Pontiac, the same car in which Yesenia had met her end. She was now entombed in a suitcase, stashed away in the trunk. For the next several weeks, the couple lived inside the car. They were eating, sleeping, using substances, all whilst their son, Jesus Jr., was still alive, with his sister's remains rotting away just a few feet from him. Dominguez Sr. said the smell came slowly at first. They tried using baby powder and cat litter to mask it, but by April, it was unmistakable. Still though, he did nothing. Corena, meanwhile, had grown increasingly frustrated with Jesus Jr. He had now begun regressing in his toilet training, something that could well have been happening due to stress and anxiety or fear. He was 5 years old, remember. Every accident though seemed to trigger Corena's rage, a rage that had already claimed one life. So honestly, what chance did he stand? In court, Dominguez Sr. described the atmosphere inside the car as tense, filthy and dangerous. They were regularly using illicit substances. They parked up in abandoned lots or behind gas stations. And each morning, they'd wake up beside the decomposing body of somebody that they should have loved and protected. But instead, they just carried on like nothing was wrong. Jesus Jr., Dominguez Sr. said, never asked about his sister. Horrifically, she was still so close physically, but she was gone in every other sense. From late March through to May of 2018, as the family continued to live in the car, the suitcase holding Yesenia's body remained sealed in the trunk. It was wrapped in plastic and surrounded by childish attempts to hide the smell. But that smell was growing harder and harder to ignore, especially as the seasons changed. In the back seat, 5-year-old Jesus Jr. was still alive, but what an absolutely horrifying thing to even begin to think about. He must have been so confused, isolated, trapped and scared. To think of him being so neglected and alone really breaks my heart. Poor, poor boy. Dominguez Sr. testified that Jesus Jr.'s behaviour began to shift. He said he became quiet and anxious. He stopped playing altogether. His toilet training regressed further and further, and every small mistake, every accident, became a lightning rod for Corena's fury. Dominguez Sr. claimed that he tried to keep the peace, but peace was impossible in those conditions. He said Corena was using substances heavily by that point, and he was too. And now that money was running out, both adults were suffering the effects of withdrawal, paranoia, and exhaustion from a hectic life. The Pontiac Grand Dam became a mobile family mausoleum. One part trap, one part crime scene, just a total nightmare. But despite everything, they kept on driving around. They used the car to run errands, to buy their next fix, and to sleep in shifts. According to Dominguez Sr., Corena would scream at Jesus Jr. for soiling himself. She once even threatened to tie him to the roof of the car. And another time, when he wet his pants once again, she dragged him to a self-service car wash and sprayed him down with a high-pressure hose. Dominguez said he was there when it happened. He said he remembered Jesus Jr. screaming. The water was cold and sharp, and it left red welts on the inner thighs. Still though, no hospital, no checkup, no help. The only thing they ever did was threaten him to stay quiet, and so he did. Dominguez Sr. described Jesus Jr. as withdrawn. He rarely spoke unless spoken to. He just sat there, clinging to old toys and stuffed animals. But then, even those small, final comforts were taken away from him as punishment. And while all of this was happening, his sister Yesenia's body remained just a few feet away, in the trunk in the suitcase, day after day, night after night, until finally, in late April or early May of 2018, Jesus Jr. would be with his sister once more. Dominguez Sr. claims that he stepped out of the car to run an errand, though that later turned out to be a pickup of substances. When he returned, Corena was in the front seat, and Jesus Jr. was now completely still. She turned to him and said, "He's not breathing." Dominguez Sr. claims that he froze. According to his later testimony, the scene in the Pontiac felt hauntingly familiar. Just like with Yesenia, Corena offered no explanation. There was no signs of panic, and there was no signs that she had tried to save his life. All she could say, "He's not breathing." The details of Jesus Jr.'s final moments remain murky. By the time he was found, no autopsy could determine the exact cause of his passing due to the decomp. The remains were far, far too gone. But what we do know is this: neither adult once again called 911. Nobody checked for a pulse, perhaps he could have been saved. Instead, they just followed the same sick pattern as they had with Yesenia. Dominguez Sr. claimed they drove to a secluded spot near the Pueblo Dam, and there they retrieved another suitcase, one that they had been keeping in the back seat. They laid out multiple trash bags, and then they placed the body inside, wrapping it in layers of plastic and old blankets. Dominguez Sr. told the court he could barely look. Once the suitcase was sealed, they then stuffed it into the trunk, right next to Yesenia. Brother and sister, side by side, hidden inside this car from hell. After that, their spiral really accelerated. Dominguez said that he began using more heavily, just whatever substances they could now find. Dominguez Sr. said the Pontiac had now become unbearable, as if it wasn't before. Even through the air fresheners, cat litter and baby powder, the smell was now completely overwhelming. Eventually, the couple moved Yesenia's body from the car and into a metal trash can and filled it with concrete. They sealed it up and left it in the storage unit that they were living in. However, they kept the second suitcase containing Jesus Jr. inside the trunk. But when that car eventually stopped running later that year, they simply abandoned it. And with it, they abandoned Jesus Jr. once again. That vehicle was eventually sold for scrap. It was taken to a local junkyard, and there it was parked up and untouched for nearly 6 years. Nobody ever opened the trunk. No one asked any questions. And so, Corena and Dominguez Sr. continued their lives. They just kept on telling anybody that inquired that the kids now lived in Arizona, and so they had no funeral, no headstones, nobody grieving for them. They were reduced to a suitcase in a junkyard and a concrete-filled trash can, forming a makeshift tomb. But still, somehow, for almost 6 years, that lie held out. Until that is, as we know, Corena's own mother opened the lid of that metal bin in January of 2024, and the silence was now finally broken. When the truth finally surfaced in early 2024, the legal fallout would come fast. Corena and Dominguez Sr. were arrested in February, and each of them faced 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of a body. Dominguez Sr. faced a charge for government benefit fraud because, as we know, even after the children were gone, the couple continued to collect support that was meant for them. At first, both of them stayed silent, but then the prosecutors offered Dominguez Sr. a deal. If he testified against Corena, they would reduce his charge from first-degree murder to second-degree. He accepted, and in July, he stood in court and described what happened. The jury listened as he recounted the car, the smell, and the quiet suffering from inside the Pontiac. He spoke about Yesenia being made to sit on the plastic bag. He talked about the pressure washing incident. He repeated Corena's chilling words, "He's not breathing," all whilst Corena sat just feet away. When it was finally Corena's turn to speak, She didn't deny knowing what had happened. Instead, her defense told a different story. She said that she wasn't the killer, Dominguez Sr. was. Her lawyers argued that she acted out of fear, out of manipulation, and, strangely, out of love. They said that Dominguez was violent and controlling. They claimed that Corena only helped to hide the bodies because of the fact that she was terrified of him. Prosecutors, however, pointed to receipts. Literal receipts. Concrete that was purchased with Corena's credit card. The storage unit that was hired in Corena's name. Her vehicle, her suitcase. And they pointed to other behaviour too. Blocking family members who tried to see the kids, calling police on relatives that were asking questions, telling everyone that the children were in Arizona. They reminded jurors that not once in 6 years was there evidence that Corena had even tried to call for help. Not when Yesenia or Jesus Jr. needed her the most. Not even when the smell made her own mother joke. Did someone die in there? The courtroom was quiet when that quote was read aloud. It was the realization that a life had been reduced to a smell, that someone was now trying to just laugh away. After days of testimony, closing statements cut straight to the point. Jesus Jr. and Yesenia had quietly disappeared, and the very people that should have been responsible for their care had instead turned their car and their storage unit into horrifyingly disrespectful graves. When the jury returned, there was no hesitation. Corena Minjarez was guilty. 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of abuse of a body. The judge delivered her sentence that same day, and it was final. No chance of parole. Corena would have no future beyond those prison walls. After the verdict, the courtroom shifted its attention to the only person still left to face their punishment. In September, Jesus Dominguez Sr., the one who took the plea deal, was sentenced to 32 years in prison. And now Corena Minjarez has already begun serving life without parole. 2 lives were lost, countless lives were destroyed, 2 adults are behind bars, neither of which may ever get out. There are no dramatic statements I could make, or emotional apologies that I could share that could ever change anything here. In this case, what's done is done, and sadly, it's just god-awful. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.